Hi. So this is kind of usual or different from my usual stuff, but I just wanted to talk really quickly about this Drake and Kendrick Lamar thing that's happening right now and just say, which I'm sure many other people are saying, I hope that they're saying, the real victims of this situation are women and children and people who suffer from abuse, who experience abuse, people who experience being abandoned by their families, by their parents. Those are the real victims, and the use of violence against women, the use of trauma, childhood trauma and abandonment, all of that being used to go toe to toe in some type of strange argument that my sister was saying she's now struggling to believe is even real and could be like staged. It's very scary. I haven't been following the conversation very closely but I just wanted to talk about like the danger and the recklessness of exposing big traumas that are happening to people, exposing that to the public, especially when the person who is saying these things is like a retaliator. They're not actually on your side. When it comes to whether any of these things are true, I couldn't possibly know. I'm not in these people's personal lives, but it doesn't actually matter. Drake going on and talking about the abuse that Kendrick Lamar's wife could be experiencing at the hands of Kendrick Lamar is dangerous, not only for his wife, because one, everyone who works in crisis management, anyone who's a caseworker, who's a social worker, who is in community, who has been around people who are being abused, knows that exposure does not solve the problem. Exposure does not stop the issue from happening. Exposing Kendrick Lamar would not now make Kendrick Lamar go home and not beat his wife. That's not how things go. In fact, oftentimes, especially once people seem to to realize that no one's going to be able to do anything about it, they go home and cause even more chaos, participate in even more abuse. And usually the victim suffers, especially because it's coming at the hands of someone who is an enemy in this situation. Who knows what kind of blame is going to be pushed onto his wife, what kind of, how much more she's going to be victimized, if she is being victimized. If this isn't true, the fact that he is saying these things and including the issue of domestic violence and inevitably bringing in all survivors of abuse and all people who circulate around the conversation of abuse without having all the facts together, without having some type of solution in place, some type of support system in place, you're just opening up a can of worms and doing nothing about the conversations that it creates. Imagine being his wife, or imagine just being a current victim of abuse, probably in silent, hiding in plain sight, and seeing online that people don't believe you. And not that they don't believe you because you haven't gone out yourself and said it, but that they don't believe the person who's saying that you're experiencing this. How are you going to feel comfortable to ever be like, oh yeah, you know what, like this is true. I am experiencing this. I don't know what people are saying because, like I said, I don't even want to be too involved, but it felt wrong to not talk about this. You just have no idea what using these stories and using these experiences and using people's lives for your own benefit do, not just to these people, but to the entire community. Because we are not just single individuals, especially people who end up facing a lot of systemic oppression, bigger forms of oppression. We usually experience things as a unit, as a community. You'll know that many women have experienced domestic violence. Many people have experienced domestic violence. Many people are survivors. We have a lot of uniting experiences, especially around trauma. And when these conversations begin to enter back into the fold, especially if you're still living with your abuser or your abuser is still in your life, which oftentimes that's the case, because oftentimes your abuser is the person that you know. Your abuser is your partner. Your abuser is your ex. Your abuser is the person that you had children with. Is he thinking about the fact that she can't just leave home forever and run off? She's got kids. And on Kendrick Lamar's side, you're exposing some type of abuse that's happening in Hollywood that we've been hearing about. But you're only doing this now that we're in this toe-to-toe battle. So you were a bystander to all of this, or were you also participating in all of this? You're exposing Drake's other children and the women that he's abandoned. And are you thinking about the children? Are you thinking about how they feel? Did anyone think about how Adonis felt or is going to feel about his origin story into the spotlight, into his father's life? After it came from some random man named Pusha T, like someone he didn't even know, right? And then had all this conversation happening online. Is anyone thinking about the fallout of trauma that is occurring just for these men to engage in some type of weird dick swinging contest? I don't even know what it is. It feels deeper than the ego. I don't even like to blame the ego all the time because I feel like that's a cop-out. It feels beyond. But it's weak, and I can't even understand how any of this qualifies as a real rap battle. A real artist should be able to just purely critique your work and be able to go toe-to-toe in that. You should not have to lean on the abuse and the suffering of people's families, of people's children, of people's partners, ex-partners, in order to make your rap go viral or mean something or have prominence. You're not real. And it's just so reckless, it's just so dangerous, and it's incredibly disappointing. If this is all fake and all staged, I think that what we can take from this is to have a deeper conversation about abuse in the home, and to have a deeper conversation about what's happening with children and being abandoned, and the fact that when your mother isn't considered valuable, the children aren't considered valuable, and the real connection that lies between women and their children, and the value that they will have in men's lives, especially men with specific forms of power, but all men, honestly. They're also not thinking about the fact that, Kendrick Lamar is an abuser and he's abusing his wife, supposedly, I don't know. Who knows how many other people are going to be like, because he's also deemed as this conscious rapper, this kind of gives me clearance. Well, if he can still be a good guy and care about these things, but he does this, then am I really that bad? And you might think that that's a crazy form of thinking, but is it? Because we live in a follower world. We're tribal people. We follow each other. And I'm absolutely positive that there are certain people now giving themselves clearance because they see, if Kendrick does it, then, hey, it's only human. And not to mention that we've actually seen this is not a new conversation. Abuse against women in the hip-hop industry is not a new conversation, and it being used nonchalantly and being talked about nonchalantly is not new. I haven't listened to Kendrick Lamar since I heard one of his verses talking about abusing a white woman, and I think it was sexually abusing a white woman in order to get some type of vengeance for his ancestors. I don't even remember it, but I was obviously disgusted, and it's just so funny how obtuse something like that is, because you're clearly not thinking about the women of your ancestry who experience sexual violence, and it's just why would anyone get any pleasure out of that? And it's the same way that I think that J. Cole was right to pull away from this, because this is clearly not about rap. This is something else, something strange and horrible. But even his line, the pain and strife that has a man beating on his wife, there's always an excuse. And there's always, it's never being taken seriously enough, and I find it really troubling, and I feel really bad for all of the children, all of the women that are being thrown and tossed around in this debate and used for these men's, I don't know what they're getting out of this at the end of the day. It's horrible. And I don't know how you move beyond this. Like, are you just going to release another verse after you've been accused of being a pervert? Are you releasing another verse after you've been accused of being an abuser? Like, what do you do at this point? Things have been destroyed in my mind. And now, how can you just continue on being an artist? There's just so much more to talk about now, and you can't be seen the same. And so if this is all fake, what a thing to create. But either way, I really hope that at the end of the day, when it comes to these conversations, we're really focusing on who are the topics of these conversations, not the guys that are having these conversations, but who's being used, whose experiences are being used.